As a designer, I have traveled all over the world investigating incredible feats of architecture. And right now, I'm going to take you inside the expansion of Amsterdam.
One of the fastest growing cities in Europe has run out of room to grow. They're breaking with tradition in a $1 billion expansion project, adding 18,000 new homes. And for the first time in their history, all of them built above sea level.
I'm on a brand new piece of land.
On some of the largest man-made islands in the world, covering nearly 2 square miles, made from over 700,000 tons of sand.
Hang on, buddy, we're going for a ride.
And the world's first designed floating community.
Holland is used to making land from water, and now we're making floating land from water.
With floating houses unlike any before.
Parking 2 houses side by side right now.
It's a 30-year project to build above rising waters.
Are we seriously going to go in the water?
Rock and roll, man.
Today is a very significant day in this city. Right now, the single largest floating office building in Amsterdam is about to come home.
Over 7,000 square feet, weighing over 600 tons, fully outfitted with 38 rooms.
This is the first time I've ever seen a tugboat drag behind it an office building. I mean, it's awesome.
One of the largest floating buildings ever constructed, represents the dramatic reimagination of a city that has no place left to build.
I'm in Amsterdam, the capital city of the Netherlands. Now, this is a city that is built on borrowed land.
70% of this 85 square mile metropolis is built on reclaimed land, nearly all of it below sea level.
But as a result of this origin, the city has spent nearly 1,000 years battling back the water, with a flood management infrastructure that includes 10,000 miles of dams, dikes, floodgates, and canals. The Dutch have become masters at managing the water.
Amsterdam spends over $10 million a year, with a team of 1,800 working to keep it dry.
I mean, this isn't just a kind of a beautiful, picturesque body of water where you're just enjoying the view.
Yeah.
This requires massive amounts of infrastructure that is constantly working.
Yeah.
Right.
It is in the veins of the system. It's all working together to keep the water out.
The threat of floods has not kept its population from exploding. 100,000 new residents in the past 4 decades, far outpacing the number of places to live.
The city of Amsterdam has got to expand. But this time around, they're doing it in a way that doesn't fight against the water, but instead works with it.
Construction is now underway on a revolutionary $1 billion expansion project called Ijburg. 8 man-made islands, covering nearly 2 square miles, with 18,000 new homes and 150 that float, creating the largest designed floating community in the world. And for the first time in the city's history, all 45,000 residents will live above sea level.
You have a city that is constantly pumping rainwater out.
Yeah, and that's not the right solution. We should live with the nature and the water and not fighting against it.
There's something great about that. People who have been sort of historically known to create land are now finding ways to live without land.
We have to do it. 1/3 of our country is water, and cities are growing, so now you have to also take use of the water and build on top of it.
While smaller houseboats have been around for over 50 years, a new engineering development has allowed them to nearly double in size. An innovative 68-ton hull made entirely of concrete. Built 30 miles away at the largest floating home manufacturer in the world. A 2-acre factory where each year they churn out over 60 state-of-the-art houses, offices, and schools, all built atop concrete hulls. Designed to be buoyant using the exact same principle as ships: displacement.
You're probably asking yourself, why is it that this big, heavy concrete foundation doesn't just sink when it gets into the water? The answer is Archimedes, the famous Greek mathematician who proved the Archimedean principle, which basically says the following. If the weight of the water displaced by an object, which in this case is all the water that would have been in this void, is equal to the weight of the object, which in this case is the house, then you have positive buoyancy. In other words, your house will float.
Engineers chose concrete because it's non-corrosive and lasts practically forever in water. But not just any concrete foundation will float. In the foundations of land-based homes, the walls and floors are built separately, leaving joints, creating flexibility to absorb the expansion and contraction of concrete due to temperature shifts. But those joints could also let in water. In floating homes, the basement is also a hull, so a single crack could sink the house. So to stay afloat, they build it without a single joint, by pouring all four walls and the floor in one shot, making it an impermeable, monolithic concrete hull.
So we have to make this completely watertight.
Yeah.
No holes,
No holes,
no cracks,
no cracks,
no spaces,
never happens.
no nothing.
No nothing.
All right. Today we are going to pour the hull of a ship, the cellar of a house, the basement of a building that will be floating ideally for the next 20 or 30 years. What do? Now there is a degree of time sensitivity because we have to pour this one and a number of other concrete batches full before any of it dries, because this has to be one solid single pour. I have to say one thing. It's a little hard to know everyone's name without everyone having their names written on their jumpers. So that's Harm, that's you down there? Harm. You gotta be careful, you don't want to get in harm's way.
The crew has just one shift to pour the entire 18 by 36 foot hull. To do this, the factory uses a special tool called a kubel, a bucket suspended from a crane, able to unload 200 gallons of concrete in less than a minute.
The trick with pouring a watertight monolithic hull is that the second we open this, when the concrete pour begins, we cannot stop until the entire hull is completely done. You ready, Kurt?
Yeah.
All right, 1, 2.
Keep it straight, Danny.
Keep it straight. You want to get all that concrete nice and easy.
Okay. I got him.
You got it?
Perfect.
And the kubel is empty.
It takes 20 kubels to pour the entire hull. Crews begin with the walls.
We're going to be dumping kubel all day.
Unlike a typical foundation, where the walls are built of the exact same thickness, workers build these walls with varying thicknesses up to 5 inches.
So, Kurt, for example, why are the two wall thicknesses different? This side's thinner than that side.
Sometimes the people are going to live in it. They tell us, I want to put a bed on that corner.
So, the homeowners actually tell you where the bed's going to go, where the TV's going to go, where the sofa's going to go, and based upon the weight of those objects, you can counterbalance that by thickening a concrete wall or thinning another.
Yeah.
In fact, this side of the wall is practically that thick, about 5 inches, whereas this wall is about 2.5, 3 inches. So that side is practically twice as thick as that side, and therefore twice as heavy, to account for the fact that there's probably a very large waterbed on the other side of the house. So now the next step is to pour the entire floor. Kurt, you clearly have skills.
With the entire hull poured, workers then fuse the walls and floor together to create a watertight seal by vibrating the concrete.
What's unlike a normal vibration job on a concrete project is that I'm lowering this down just to a certain depth, and I start to see a bit of concrete bleed onto the floor, because beyond just aerating the concrete and getting the air bubbles out, I'm trying to fuse the vertical wall with the horizontal floor. So what you've just seen is a fairly unique concrete pouring process, and not just because of our outfits. Essentially, after 20 kubles and a lot of handwork, we've created one single monolithic concrete hole that'll not just become the foundation for a floating house, but it's this right here that'll make it float.
Coming up, making the largest new island in Amsterdam on quicksand.
I didn't think quicksand was a real thing. It's a real thing?
It is.
There's an old saying in the Netherlands. God created the earth, but it was the Dutch that created Holland. And it's really true. For nearly 1,000 years, the Dutch have been creating a city on what is essentially a swamp.
Amsterdam, originally a 120-acre landmass at the mouth of the North Sea. And for over 1,000 years, engineers have been building dikes and draining lakes and swamps to create buildable land called polders. There are 20 miles of polders in the city, and some are 15 feet below sea level.
You know, it's incredible. As I look out here, I'm looking into the second story of people's homes.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
I mean, this is a condition for those of us in America that you see exactly in New Orleans. I mean, this is just like an earthen levee, and that would just be like the lower Ninth Ward, a city that lives about 15 feet below sea level.
Like New Orleans, if just one dike fails, nearly the entire city could be underwater in just 48 hours.
So those perimeter walls are forcibly holding back water from coming into that polder.
Yeah. It's not just pump once and you're dry forever.
Right.
It's a constant pumping, 24 hours a day, every day.
Facing a housing crisis, the only place left to build is in the water. The 200-square-mile lake, Ijburg. This time, engineers are not repeating history. So instead of building at the bottom of a lake, they're building on top of it, creating 8 new islands, each 4 feet above sea level.
Which means for the first time in some instances, you actually can look out and actually enjoy the water and not have the water kind of pushing down at your home.
Yes, that's one of the main ideas behind the island making here.
What's so challenging about building land specifically here outside Amsterdam?
The biggest problem of all is a technical problem, and that is that the bottom of the lake is not very solid. It consists of thick layers of very soft soil. 10 meters thick is what we have to make the islands on.
The construction of man-made islands is actually a fairly straightforward process. You get yourself a ton of sand, and then take that sand and dump it on a nice, solid sea floor. But the problem is, what do you do if you don't have a solid foundation? The answer came in the form of something called the pancake method. Here the Dutch put down a large, thin layer of sand, a sand pancake, in one huge area. Wait 30 days, then apply another sand pancake, one after the next, slowly building up that island to 12 feet above the sea level. Ultimately, the island sinks down to its final height of 4 feet above water, and by doing this progressively, they don't overwhelm the foundation, and in the end, they create a large, solid, stable island.
A crew of 30 is building the largest of the 8 islands. At 300 acres, there's enough space for 3,000 homes. Each day, an armada of 8 ships dig up 2,000 tons of sand from the lake bed, then spray it, creating over 1 land pancake a month.
All right, we're docking here.
Aboard the ship, they make a cocktail of 20% sand and 80% water.
The idea here is to lubricate the sand, turn it into a soupy kind of slurry, and that slurry can be more easily sucked up by the vacuum cleaner.
While this produces a slurry that's loose enough to pump onto the shore at 5,000 cubic feet an hour, on the land, it creates a potentially lethal situation.
All right, so now I am standing on the newly formed 5th island of Ijburg. And the most important thing to be careful of is drift sand. So that image represents someone sinking into quicksand.
Yes, be careful.
I didn't think quicksand was a real thing. It's a real thing?
It is.
All right. We're going to the quicksand to build the 5th island of Ijburg. So, Jan, this is the stuff. The water mixed with the sand does actually create the quicksand. You can actually sink into that.
Yes. You'll sink a little bit into it.
The quicksand is especially malleable, ideal for forming islands. A challenge for a 25-ton bulldozer, which has to move constantly to avoid sinking.
So, it's okay if I get in there?
Yeah, you can.
He's out? You're done?
I kan er weer.
Wait, what's your name?
Albert.
Albert. I'm Danny. How are you? Good to meet you. You mind if I borrow your bulldozer?
Oh yes,
It's okay?
Yes, that's okay, but I go with you.
You'll come with me?
Yes.
Good. It's like a learner's permit. In America, when you learn how to drive, someone comes with you like an adult supervises that first time. You want to give me a brief explanation on how to operate this thing?
I go.
Beautiful. Okay.
Okay.
We're going.
The
Okay.
steering is going so.
Oh, like that. Okay.
The pedal.
Where's the brake?
Yes.
Now that we're in here together, I can tell you this is my first bulldoze ride.
What?
Hang on, buddy. We're going for a ride.
Today, the team is laying the next 3-foot layer of the land pancake. But to prevent the sand from falling off the side and into the water, the bulldozing team is building a 4-foot tall perimeter wall. To create the formwork for the island, they build each section 12 feet high. Any lower, and it would settle below sea level.
Making some Amsterdam. Give it some gas, huh? Oh, you okay? Sorry.
Yes.
You all right?
Yes, yes.
You're a very calm man. I gotta say, I enjoy working with you.
By creating 20 acres of land each week, the crew will finish the entire island in just 4 months' time.
We didn't break the bulldozer.
No,
Check. We did make some sand pancakes.
sure.
Check. We did collaboratively extend the Ijburg Island
Yes.
and make Amsterdam that much bigger.
That's correct. Okay.
Dankjewel, my friend.
Okay, goed.
Coming up, flooding a dry dock holding a $500,000 home with 12,000 gallons of water.
That is just a bizarre sight.
Amsterdam's population has increased by 50,000 over the last 4 decades, far outpacing the number of new homes built. Demand for housing is so high that families entered a lottery to buy one of the first floating homes in the Ijburg project, each costing up to $500,000. And the winners began moving in 3 years ago.
So, Dennis, tell me about the decision to come live in a floating house.
Yeah, it's really beautiful because it gives a sense of freedom.
And how does your son enjoy living here?
He likes it very much. He always wants to swim here, but this moment is a bit cold.
Are you able to, when the weather's warm, just open your door and jump in the water?
Yeah.
Architects see these first 150 floating homes as a launching point for larger communities, larger buildings, even skyscrapers.
So is it your sense that these pioneers here are catalysts for large-scale change?
Yeah, I believe so. Now we come to the next step, in which you say a floating house is the same as a normal house, it only has a floating foundation. And if you look upon it like that way, then you also can look about floating apartment buildings, and floating parks, and floating green, floating agriculture, all functions that can be done on water.
So as you look at this area, you don't see a one-time experiment. You don't see a kind of small community village.
I see a small community, but it's just a first step.
While Aldous and his team have designs for structures as tall as 25 stories, the size of floating buildings in Amsterdam is limited not by their height, but instead by their width, dictated by the very system keeping the city dry, the over 50 miles of canals and 20 locks. The homes have to travel 30 miles from the factory, across a lake, through 4 miles of canals, and 2 sets of locks, just to get to Ijburg. Designing houses thin enough to fit through 20-foot wide locks solves one challenge, but also creates another.
The typical dimensions of the Ijburg houses 15 feet wide and 27 feet tall, which means this thing is basically twice as tall as it is wide. The problem is, being this thin means the entire structure will tend to sway and bob given the movement of the water.
Engineers designed the structures in two sections, individually able to fit through the locks. But when attached, the size of the base doubles, making a single building 10 times more stable. Until they're attached, the two halves are susceptible to tipping. So workers have to be extremely careful when floating the sections for the first time, starting when they flood the dry dock with 12,000 gallons of water.
So in order to raise the water level in the wet dock, we've taken a pipe, put it outside the canal, brought that pipe in, and right now this thing is flooding the wet dock, and slowly but surely each of these houses are going to start rising.
Once the house begins to rise, crews lift the steel gate, dividing the wet dock from the dry dock.
Now, had you been curious that we're in fact in Holland on a Dutch construction site, just to kind of put that in perspective, that guy's wearing wooden shoes.
After an hour of filling the dry dock, crews are now ready to move the 140-ton house into the wet dock by attaching it to a tugboat.
We're going to hop in a boat, connect it, and literally drag the house right out. Peter, you ready? There's a cable coming out of the house. We're going to take that cable, attach it to a winch on the front of the tugboat, which will let us back up and slowly pull this house out. Is that true, Peter?
Yes, that's true.
You're not lying, are you?
No, I'm not lying. I would never do that.
You would never. I can tell. You're an honest guy. You're a huge guy, but you're an honest guy.
Thanks.
The trick about what we're trying to do right now is that when you built this thing, it was sitting flush on the bottom of the concrete floor.
Yes.
And what we're slowly trying to do by adding water is get it buoyant and get it to start floating.
Yes.
And only when it's floating,
we can pull it out.
We can pull it out.
Yes.
The home has to be raised 5 feet to avoid scraping the floor.
Maak die trekbanen maar los, leg die maar in de woning of hang.
How's it looking, Peter? Is it coming up?
Yes.
It's floating?
Yes, but now we're trying to level it downstairs.
With the house floating, it's tipping beyond the safe limit of 4 degrees.
So I'm standing on one side of the house, myself, my modest 155 pounds. Look at this. As I walk from one side of the house to the other, like a boat, the entire keel of the house changes.
Because engineers designed the house to hold over half a ton of furniture, when it's empty, crews have to compensate for that missing weight.
Look at this, that's crazy.
They do that by temporarily adding ballast to the basement, which makes it stable enough to move.
So a really fascinating side of this project is that now that we have the house floating, the issue is it's not level. For example, the bathrooms are on that side of the house, which means the house tends to tilt that way. So in order to countermand that, we have these, a series of ballast tanks, essentially big rubber containers full of water that put weight on this side of the house. So while the house naturally pitches this way, with these ballast tanks, we level the house out and are able to go out into the dock.
Using 10 400-pound barrels, the crew levels the home just enough to move it to the wet dock.
Peter,
Yes?
give it some gas, baby.
Okay.
Here we go, moving a house. That is just a bizarre sight. It's a house, it's a floating house, Peter.
Floating house.
Nice driving, Peter.
Floating 5 feet above the floor, the house is docked, and the crew starts the prep work for its 8-hour journey to Amsterdam.
Coming in, and we have parked. I think one of the first things you notice when you drive through Ijburg is that it looks wildly different from Amsterdam, but at the same time incredibly similar. They have the same tall, skinny row houses, really amazing sense of density, but the houses look incredibly unique one to the next. How do you find a way to create a community that expands the city, but also doesn't lose the character of what people love about it?
You have to create an atmosphere that's connected the new neighborhood with Amsterdam, because the people liked Amsterdam, they liked the atmosphere, and we want to put the atmosphere into the new neighborhood of Ijburg.
So the elements that made Amsterdam amazing, the the tight houses, the living densely, living on the water, even having houseboats, all those elements have been reimagined in a new community here.
Redesigned in a new form.
Crews just finished building Ijburg's newest 300-acre island, the future site for a community of 3,000 new row houses. But the soil is currently too soft to support the thousands of tons of houses and roads. Before construction can begin, the soil has to be compacted. The water trapped inside has to be pressed out before the land will be strong enough to support the weight of the new neighborhood. Left to occur naturally, the process would take 10 years.
However, they've developed a solution that can chop 8 years off the process. How do you expedite a natural process of compaction?
What we do is we put in a large amount of vertical drains, which look like this. We call them straws, but they're actually very flat. So the water, which is under pressure in the subsoil, can flow out of the soil through these drains.
Okay, so myself and Hassan are going to stick in some vertical drainage straws. And the amazing thing to point out is we're going to be doing this extremely quickly. Literally one drain, 30 feet in the ground every 30 seconds. So fast that Hassan has no time to wait for me. He's going.
Using a specially designed machine, workers plunge 30-foot-long plastic straws into the sand, releasing pressure and allowing the water to push to the surface.
Inside this sheathing is the straw itself, is our vertical drainage tube. So as soon as this hits its maximum depth, as we remove the sheathing, what we leave in our place is the actual straw in the hole.
Workers are installing 500,000 straws into each island.
It's very meditative. It's a very kind of relaxing construction. Sort of like a Japanese Zen garden, you know, just like inserting your straws, putting them in the right pattern, and then cutting them.
To finish on time, they have to insert 10,000 every day.
Now the process might seem a bit repetitive, right? Putting in hundreds of thousands of straws, but their impact is unmistakable. This entire newly created island will take 10 years to sink otherwise, but thanks to these thin little paper straws, it'll happen in just 2.
While it takes 3 years to create islands and then build homes, the floating homes can be built and installed in just 4 months. But unlike the land-based homes, they face a challenge unique to building on water.
There's a lot of scuba diving equipment around here.
Yes.
So we're gonna jump in the water.
Yeah.
But it's very cold water.
Yeah, the ice just disappeared 1 week.
Yeah, it's winter time.
Yeah.
So our job today, we have to make them one, bolt it together, make sure it doesn't float away.
Yeah, and that there is no friction in between, because and that's for the 4 points. That's the reason we have to do it underwater, to avoid the friction between the houses.
Situated side by side, water constantly pushes on the homes with 1,000 pounds of force, causing the two halves to move independently. Over time, it can damage the hull and the home. So to prevent them from rubbing, engineers leave a 1-inch gap between the halves, affixing them in 3 places with steel plates, on the top, middle, and underneath, creating a structure that pushes against the water as a solid, single unit. Today, the team is attempting to make the most difficult connection, located 6 feet underwater.
Like, not even kidding right now, I'm in Amsterdam today. It's 39 degrees. Who am I going down with? Are you coming down with me, my friend Joost?
I'm the supervisor, and I like to stay warm.
See, look at that. I'm the supervisor. Why would I go in that water? This is a bad idea. Bad idea. Sometimes, you know, you get knee deep in something and you sort of didn't think it through first, and now you're holding a commercial diving suit with an enormous man named Joost in 30-degree water. Joost, everything's good, yeah?
Yeah, it's excellent.
This is diving shoot?
Yes.
Sure diving shoes this day?
This is for me.
Yes, this is for you?
Okay.
Okay.
You know, the resort certification course that I did in the pool in Puerto Rico, we didn't have these. Yeah, so your feet and the head and the arm and the whole thing. Okay.
Is this your shoot?
Good. You have one too?
Yes, I have another one.
Great.
These dry suits are critical because crews have to spend an hour underwater attaching the homes. If they dove into 40-degree water unprotected, hypothermia would set in 15 minutes.
I think it's important just to put in perspective before I dive in here. What we're doing today, we're actually not inventing cold fusion. We're not going to shoot a rocket into space. We're going to be putting a couple bolts in and making two floating homes not create friction. This feels very elaborate for I'm not going to get into it.
The dry suit is designed to prevent water from entering the suit. Seals at the neck and the wrists compress like rubber bands around the diver to form a watertight seal.
This is supposed to be very tight here, right? That's the idea?
No.
Really?
A little bit.
I'm a little lightheaded, I'm not gonna lie. I'd like to lose my pulse everywhere possible.
It shouldn't close your bloodstream, not that tight.
Okay, a little less than. This is okay. No water gets through that?
The amount of water which gets in will take the temperature of your body and then it stays in.
Okay.
The gloves are made from a semi-permeable material, which allows a thin layer of water between the gloves and the skin. The diver's body temperature then heats the water, transforming it into an insulator.
This is made for a human. Yeah. We're all just gonna do it, just ram it on.
Otherwise the water go through.
Does everyone just do it?
Come on.
Alright, 1, 2. Okay. Oh.
Yeah. In Holland, it's not allowed to say that.
Oh, I didn't mean to. Sorry. That's all right. We're good. Everything's good. Yeah, it's good. It's good. All right, cool. This apparently is what's required to assemble floating homes in one of the first and largest floating home communities in the world. Someone told me this beforehand, but that's great.
You happy?
I'm okay. Visibility is crazy, man. I don't know if it's gonna work.
To eliminate friction between the homes, we're now connecting a steel plate to both hulls with 3 bolts on either side.
We have the plate here. Screw that bolt now. There you go.
The team on the surface acts as a second pair of eyes, making sure the installation is done correctly.
Okay, I got a wrench. I got a bolt. I got a dream.
Wearing 50 pounds of gear in near freezing water makes even the easiest task of turning a bolt a challenge.
It's so hard to keep your balance. Okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, with this last one, we are going to lock this into position. And look at this. As you can see right here, this steel bolt with 3 bolts on one side and 3 bolts on the other is now on the 2 buildings, and the 2 buildings are sealed as one solid homogeneous floating object.
Okay, Danny, it looks very good. All the bolts are in position. You can come back to the ladder.
Rock and roll, baby.
Okay? You okay?
Good job. That was totally amazing. That was absolutely incredible.
Amsterdam in winter.
Amsterdam in winter. That was amazing.
Coming up, hitting rough water.
Oh my gosh.
On one of Amsterdam's most expensive floating homes.
We're going down. I thought that was it. I thought I was cooked.
In all of Amsterdam, there are only 8 buildings taller than 25 stories. That's because the bedrock needed to support tall buildings is nearly a mile below soft ground. So every single building and home needs piles driven as deep as 70 feet under the earth to keep structures standing.
The strange thing about Amsterdam is it's completely built on piles. If you go to the center of Amsterdam, there's this big palace. Underneath that palace, the palace is 50 by 50 meters, are 13,659 piles of wood to keep one building up. That's the most dense forest of Holland is underneath that building.
A typical Amsterdam home sits on 50 piles. But the floating homes of Ijburg use no piles at all. Just 2 steel mooring poles drilled 20 feet into the lakebed. But unlike their land-building counterparts, engineers of floating homes face a specific challenge: seasickness.
You actually do you end up feeling the water? Does the house rock every now and again, given the wind?
When the wind is very hot, you can feel it. Yeah, then the house is quite moving.
After years at sea, sailors can sleep on ships that pitch and roll up to 20 degrees. But homeowners and their guests would get nauseous in the same conditions. So to combat this, engineers develop an innovative mooring solution that limits the pitch and roll to less than a degree. Typically, a boat is moored by tying it to the dock in 2 places on the same side. But this generates a sway that is nearly twice the tolerated level. The solution? Moor the homes using 2 10-foot poles, one in the front and the other diagonally in the back. This specific configuration secures the home by preventing it from rocking side to side. Today, crews are mooring one of the 150 homes.
All right, boys, I'm Danny.
Hello, Marcel.
Marcel?
Raymond.
Raymond.
Yes.
For the mooring to effectively stabilize the house, it has to be tightly attached to the pole. This is done by using 2 50-pound steel brackets.
So guys, this is essentially the steel U-shaped bracket that you'll put around the mooring and then bolt to the house.
Yeah.
This is how we're going to basically connect the house to the mooring. All right.
Squeezing 20 homes along a 300-foot-long dock.
Marcel with the reinforcements, good.
Limits the workspace for the crew to just a few feet, requiring a one-of-a-kind solution.
Wait a minute, is this seriously like our work platform? Yes! Oh my gosh. You're sinking. Come to me, Raymond. Come, Raymond. You know when you've done like a lot of absurd things on different buildings and skyscrapers and tunnels, but the seemingly most reasonable thing you're ever going to do, which is tie a house to a pole, it turns into this. All right, let's moor a house.
Crews first attach the bracket to the home's concrete foundation, but the constant movement of the house could cause the bracket to shift up to half a foot. So to prevent this, the team applies a chemical adhesive that tightly bonds the bracket to the foundation.
So in order to make sure that this steel becomes a permanent addition to the concrete foundation, I'm going to insert this glass vial with an adhesive inside it into the hole. We're then going to have, excuse me, Raymond, a bolt that's angled like this, like a blade, which will smash the glass vial, mix up the adherent, and fuse the steel to the concrete for good. All right, coming in, Raymond.
You want this one?
Yeah?
In this cup.
All right. Okay. Got it. Yes. Oh. Okay. Perfect. Oh.
With the brackets in place, they now have to move the house to the mooring pole. We can just pull it.
So as Raymond cranks that ratchet, the entire house is not coming this way. Yeah, you have contact. So it's good, Raymond, yeah?
Yes,
all
it's
right,
good, sir.
You got that set, okay.
The crew now attaches the remaining brackets.
Hey, here she comes. Okay. There's very little room doing this, obviously. I'm sorry, Raymond. All right. With this fourth and final bolt tightened, this floating home is not going anywhere thanks to 2 incredible gentlemen, my friend Marcel and the always talented Raymond. Give me some skin, baby.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Good stuff. It's interesting. So the previous generation of Holland really had to battle and manage the water.
Yeah.
And this new generation wants to actually enjoy it.
Yes.
Engage with the water.
What's very interesting is the old generation, they knew how dangerous the water was. But the new generation is very well protected. The people are now enjoying it only.
With nearly all the 150 floating homes in Ijburg sold, its success has spawned more projects across Amsterdam. When Waternet, the agency charged with keeping the city dry, needed to build a new office, they decided to literally test the waters by making the city's largest floating building.
This is not a floating construction site or a barge. This is a fully completed, practically operational building. In there you have office chairs, you have seats, you have lighting, the kitchen's in place, even plants are already installed in the canteen. You know what's amazing is today you have no office.
No, tomorrow we have.
And tomorrow you have an office.
This afternoon we even have.
Costing over $2 million. One of the most expensive floating buildings ever built. Its arrival in Amsterdam is drawing a crowd.
The moving of this office building is a big deal. I mean, there are like 12 ships surrounding your building. You have the Port of Amsterdam shooting off hoses. You have boats all around us firing off their horns. This is a really, really significant moment. Did you see that? You back there, you basically freaked out a group of school kids.
Floating a building this large, this far, has never been attempted in Amsterdam. And on its final 4-mile leg of the 30-mile journey, the additional boat traffic is causing an unexpectedly large wake.
I'm a little bit concerned because you see this screw water pushing on the building.
Look at that.
To keep the water from pushing on the building, the tugboat has to adjust on the fly and turn the office 10 degrees. This slight correction has the corner of the building cutting the waves like the bow of a ship.
You see it's moved a little bit on an angle. The resistance of the water is less in this way to move it around.
Do you love that you're talking about the hydrodynamics of your office building?
Something like that, something like that.
You were seeing a building not being driven in, not a prefabricated modular situation, nothing like that. A fully completed, electrically loaded, furnished office building floating into its position and about to dock.
To fit the 102-foot-long building into a 104-foot space, like parallel parking a car, they first bring in the front end, then rotate the back end to squeeze it within inches of 3 mooring poles on either side.
Look how tight it is. I mean, look how amazingly tight this is. It's so tight there's a dude in the child's boat. I mean, the building is traveling right by me as we speak, passing the first, passing the second, and about to the third and final mooring pole.
And just like docking a boat, workers prevent damage to the concrete hull by placing rubber bumpers between the dock and the building.
It's astonishing. I mean, literally 15 minutes ago, we were here at an open dock with a few open boat slips. Now, 15 minutes later, there is a completed headquarters in this spot, and all the guys who are going to be using this building are all here checking out their brand new home. We're now going to go into the building for the very first time in its new location. So you're home. The building's home.
Yeah, the building is at home now. It's my home. Yeah, that's you can't say every day.
Congrats.
Yes.
Welcome to your new address.
Yeah, thank you very much.
In just a few days, 100 workers will call this office building home. And in 10 years, 45,000 people will live on Amsterdam's new expansion project. 600 of them in floating homes. And for the first time, the city will live and work above sea level.
So do you think that in 10, 15 years' time, we're going to see more people living on the water or working on the water?
I absolutely think in 10, 15 years there will be more of these experiments. Innovation will come from Holland, and the real tryout in large scale will be in other cities.
So you guys are breaking new ground right here, just testing out in this very small way to see if it works.
And I think countries like China, India, really can use these solutions.
You know, Amsterdam is a medieval city built on water. And for nearly 1,000 years, the Dutch have worked to manage that water, but maintain a vibrant city. But after centuries of development, those picturesque canals can no longer contain Amsterdam's expansion. And what makes the Ijburg Islands so interesting is that they're a real-world solution to the problem of expanding Amsterdam. And in 10 years from now, when the projects are done, if you come to Amsterdam, I think you'll find a radically different